Hey, Charlie and Keith here. Main show is starting in a second, but we just wanted to pop in and note that when we recorded this episode yesterday, Wednesday, we opened the show with a discussion about the college, conference, and regionals rostering issue, which you're going to be hearing about in a bit. And at the time, there was still no way for teams to add players to their regionals roster if they weren't on their conference's roster for this college fall series. Since that time, it's now Thursday at noon here on the East Coast. Late last night, USA Ultimate started emailing teams that have regionals this weekend and telling them that they have changed their minds. The policy is now that players will be allowed to be added to the regionals roster if they were registrar verified and they have a USAU membership. The teams will have to pay a $50 fee for the first player added, and any additional players will incur a $25 late fee as a way of sort of offsetting some of the administrative burden for USAU, since they did ultimately not follow the guidelines, the teams that stated that the the conference championships roster is the binding roster for the series. So, Keith, real quick reactions on this news that the USAU has reversed their policy here.
Well, we're working a little bit in reverse here. You're going to hear me say that, I hope that they find a workable solution, even if it's not a great one. And I think that this is getting there. This ultimately is getting something done where teams can rectify the issue. USA Ultimate, they charge a late fee. Hopefully that helps cover some of the costs involved, whether it's labor or whatever other types of costs they may incur. It seems fair, given that there were instructions. You can debate whether or not you feel like they were clear, but there were instructions provided to people that teams were unable to follow. So this is something of an exception for them. We really just want a chance for the players to get to play at this event and not be removed by some clerical error. So I'm glad that we're going to get past that. One of the things that I say, Charlie, is every problem has a solution, even if every solution has a problem. And that's one of these situations right here, is even though the solution is not perfect, it's challenging, it is ultimately a solution to the problem. So I'm glad that we arrived at something that's going to work.
The players get to play. Everybody tried to do the right thing. The teams tried to do the right thing, do the registrar thing. They screwed up the conferences thing. It seems like it would have been a terrible choice to leave them out because of that. And so that's not happening. I'm glad to hear it. And let's get to the main show. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. And you know what, Keith? We didn't really get very long to look in the rear view at the Club National Championships because college regionals starts in 3 days.
The current state of Ultimate feels a little bit like the dog sipping his coffee in the burning house meme right now. That's what the current state is.
Everything is a little bit crazy. But we've got 4 regions going off this weekend to kick us off. Teams trying to qualify for the national championships that are coming up in December. Atlantic Coast, Great Lakes, Metro East, and Northwest. We're going to break it all down on this show today, of course. We're also going to talk with Ring of Fire head coach Mike DeNardis and get his take on finally getting to the mountaintop and winning a club national championship just a few weeks after winning an AUDL title with the Raleigh Flyers. So looking forward to that. Keith, first, this has been a kind of a crazy day.
Yeah.
Because it sort of came to light that not just 1 or 2 teams, but like an unknown but large number of teams made a mistake with their conference's roster that is potentially, as of this moment, going to prevent the players that were not listed on their conference's roster from being able to compete with the team at regionals. So let me just take a second and try to explain in like quick terms what's going on for those who are not in the know. Every year, college teams have to submit a roster to USA Ultimate and to their registrar at their university and get it approved. USAU has to say, yes, this player has eligibility. The registrar has to say, yes, this person, in the case of this strange year, either goes to the university or went to the university. But there has to be sort of this academic eligibility check and then the overall, 5-year window check that USAU does. This year has some exceptions because of the bonus grad students who are going to be able to come back and play with their teams if their universities allow that. Now, teams went through this process. I'm sure some teams screwed it up, but most teams understand that this is a required thing. Every year, you got to get it to the registrar. You got to get it to USAU. And so they get all that information in. They get their rosters approved. Great. Now, normally, that series roster that gets sent in and approved, as far as I understand, just that is your postseason roster. That's what it's, looking back at the 2020 guidelines, that's how it's written. That's what it looks like. This year, though, the lineup that you set for conferences is the lineup that you also then must have for the rest of the series, and you can't add people to it. Even if they're on your team roster that was approved by the registrar and approved by USA Ultimate, it's the conference's roster that actually binds. Now, in a way, these are one and the same. Like in most seasons, these are one and the same. Mm-hmm. You submit the series roster. I mean, Keith, you've been involved in this. You submit the series roster, that's your roster. If you fail to put somebody on that roster, tough, you're out of luck. If somebody doesn't actually take classes at the school, they're gone. They can't play. But teams did this, and then now some of the teams did not read close enough in the guidelines where it says, there is one paragraph, and it says, you must list your entire series roster on your conference's roster. If you do not, I could quote it. I could pull it up. Let's just pull it up. To tell you exactly what it says. An athlete may only be on one roster. A team must set their roster prior to conferences. The conference championship roster is the final roster for the entire college series. If an athlete is potentially participating in regionals or the college championships but is unavailable during the conference championships, they must still appear on the conference championship roster. So you might be saying, well, if teams didn't do that and didn't follow that rule, then they're out of luck. This rule is only listed in one place. It's in the guidelines, 100%, but it is down below much of the rest of the sort of registration information and how to go through submitting the registrar roster. And it's also a little bit different than in most years because of this difference between the initial roster that's approved and the one that gets listed for conferences, which I think perhaps, Keith, is being exacerbated by the fact that there's a lot of alumni who didn't go to conferences and are going to be showing up for regionals or potentially nationals for the first time, which is obviously atypical of a normal season. So a lot of teams seem to have made this mistake, Keith, and teams seem to be figuring this out today. University of Utah, Whitman women's team, which is announced on Twitter that they're dropping out of regionals because of this. The Washington women's team, the Carleton women's team, Keith, had 6 players on their team roster that were not on their conference's roster, including Isabella Revelo, and they're the number 1 team in the country right now. This is, and Keith, you have been going through, as you've been putting together top 25s, you've seen a lot of discrepancies between conferences rosters and team rosters, right?
Absolutely. And we didn't exactly know what to make of it prior to this. If those full team rosters were vetted or how that information was filled in. It's a little counterintuitive. For most people, you're used to submitting or you're intending to submit who's going to attend that specific tournament as your roster for that tournament. And then you have your larger umbrella roster that covers everybody who will compete for your team during the course of the season. So it's a little counterintuitive to say, hey, my event roster for this specific event actually is our roster for all of the events that are going to occur this season. I can see how people got confused. I mean, you're on top of what you're talking about with it being a little bit of a different year, with this with this information being a little bit buried. You're talking about a compressed timeline. A lot of people who have been on campus for a couple weeks, a couple months, right? Usually when you're doing a lot of this roster stuff, you're all the way 6 months into your season or whatever, 5 months into your season. You have a very clear idea of who's on your team. You've gone through some of this paperwork stuff before. You also probably have a lot of new officers. A lot of people who've never done this rostering process are doing it for the first time this year. So it just makes this situation even more challenging for the players to navigate. And USA Ultimate's tried to do some things to mitigate that, additional communication, a webinar, things like that. But it seems to have not really sunk in, because we're hearing more and more teams that have this issue. And certainly there are some rosters that I've looked over in the process of doing research for the top 25, of just looking over conferences results. There are definitely rosters and some really notable players who could fall through the cracks on this one.
As it stands right now, it's 9 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesday. There has been no announcement about any kind of changes to the policy. Some teams had already inquired about this as early as the middle of last week. I know the University of Utah reached out on October 25th, I believe, which was Monday of last week, because they realized that they were having trouble adding players to their regionals roster. And in the case of Utah, they were actually told by their sectionals coordinator and the TD that the conference's roster was different than the regionals roster, and that they could have different rosters, which obviously was not true. But that shows you the level that this was confusing to people, because normally you just put in the one roster, it goes to the registrar, goes to USAU, boom, that's your roster for the postseason. So Utah has been trying to get this, get their players to be allowed to play that were not on that conference's roster. And the answers have basically been no, and then maybe there will be more information. And we're now, about less than 72 hours away from first poll. And I don't quite know what the full process is here. I believe that there is an extensive amount of manual labor required on USA Ultimate's end to verify all of these rosters, and that making changes at this point to allow changes on the regionals rosters, even though the people have already been approved by their registrar and whatnot, would be an enormous amount of work. And I think there's still a sense that both, we don't quite know the scope. I don't think USAU quite knows the scope of how many teams this appears to be affecting. So we know it's a lot. We know it's enough that you're having multiple top 25 level teams dealing with this. And I don't know, Keith, things could be different by the time this podcast comes out, but what do you think should happen here?
Well, one of the things that jumps out to me is that, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of the people I think who probably were planning to go to regionals and weren't going to conferences are the alum players that this entire series is in some ways meant to serve. So it's concerning to me that those are, I think in a lot of cases, going to be the players who miss out here. For them, conferences wasn't a big deal. It was a chance for the younger players to get more reps, but they were there to go to regionals and potentially go to nationals. So
a lot of the players don't even live by their universities anymore, probably.
Right. So why travel for 3 tournaments, especially to go to one? Especially if you're one of the top teams, I've seen the results for those teams. Most of them were beating the crap out of teams they played at conferences, as they do most years. So what do they need to go and show up there for? What does that serve? So now you're in a situation where it's going to be those players, I think, who are going to be left on the sidelines if something's not done. Now, the problem is that, like you said, it's a lot of legwork for USA Ultimate and a short timeline to fix this. It's one of those things where you don't know it's a problem until people actually go up and say hey, this is a problem. First time USA Ultimate's done this as well. So it's not like they had a system in place to know that teams were going to miss on this. Maybe you do in this sort of situation, you try and have the comparative spreadsheet that just says like, hey, there are 4 people on this team that aren't on the conference's roster, that aren't on their registrar roster. Like, we should flag that just in case if we see that keep coming up, we can note that may be something that teams are not getting. But with the timeline being really tight, it's a really difficult ask. It's hard for me to say for sure what I think should happen, given that I don't know what is involved on USA Ultimate's end of making this happen. I don't know what the cost is. So you're asking me like, do I want to buy this thing without really knowing what the price is? But at first blush, with what I do know, it feels like since the point of having this season is to let these players have that final year with their team, to let them have that final year competition, we should be working really hard. I mean, we've already bent over backwards to serve them. So letting it go to waste at this point feels a little silly. So I would want to see USA Ultimate find a way to get these players rostered correctly. I don't know what that entails, but that's what I think I want to see from where we are now.
Here's my issue. I have no sympathy for people who didn't go through the proper registrar deadline, get it approved by your university. If you missed out on that, I'm sorry. Too bad. But if a team went through the whole approach of here's our roster, USA Ultimate, here is the registrar, they're going to send the email to USAU, here's all the players, and they did that whole thing. Why is it a problem then? Like, okay, yes, you can make the case. They should have read the entire guidelines top to bottom. They should have seen this. They should have known. But the fact that there's enough teams out there that this is affecting, a non-negligible number, it's like, what is the problem with just being like, okay, like, let's just let them add players from that approved roster to the regionals roster? I don't see the problem. This just all seems unnecessarily confusing. And I think it clearly is confusing to the point that it happened to, I don't know how many teams, but 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, I don't know. It just seems to me like they've already been approved, right? It's not like they're trying to get in last minute or they failed to do the paperwork. The single mistake was not putting them on the conference's roster. So what? Just add them to the regionals roster.
Right. This is a clerical issue, not a
clerical issue.
A failure of
correct
execution. It was just like there was a misunderstanding about when it needs to be done.
And if it's going to be a nightmare amount of work, which it's possible that it is, then just tell teams that are dealing with the situation. You may play with players on your team approved roster, and that have been registrar approved. You put them on their thing, check them next week, right? First of all, there's only 4 regionals this weekend, so that limits the scope a little bit. Check them next week if you need to. And if if somebody was incorrectly registered or rostered, DQ them, right? Like put the onus on the teams to not make any errors on that front. I don't know. It just feels like it just feels a little unfair to me. I know it's in the guidelines, but it's clearly confusing. If you actually go and you read the guidelines, there's the one paragraph. The rest of the guidelines never make mention of this, and I just don't think it's all that clear that that's what needed to happen. And the normal rhythm of submit the roster that is your series roster was done by all of these teams. So it's just like, hey, let's just figure it out. Which honestly, I still think USAU is going to do that, but it hasn't happened yet. And
who has ever won in the court of public opinion with, well, it was in the fine print? You should have read the terms of service.
I don't know. Like the guidelines, you're supposed to read the guidelines.
You are, but I'm saying like no one's going to feel good about that explanation. It's just not going to win you any points. And you're a member organization. Like they know that it's not going to go over well, and it's their job to make sure that this is clearly communicated. And if it was in the guidelines and 25% of teams missed it or whatever, then it obviously wasn't highlighted well enough in the guidelines or repeated well enough. And yeah, you don't know that until after the fact. And I think people are being totally unfair to USA Ultimate, as they almost always are, when USA Ultimate does anything even slightly off of what people expected, they treat USA Ultimate like some sort of corporate monolith that's out to get them and, reach their hand in their pocket for their membership fees and then kick them to the curb. We know that it's not like that. You and I know that the people at USA Ultimate care a lot about making a positive experience and dedicate a lot of time and effort to helping make sure that happens. They don't always get it right, but we know that they're trying. So people should be conscious of that when they're communicating with or talking about publicly USA Ultimate. They have your best interests at heart. They just don't always know how to go about it in the right way. But I think that USA Ultimate can understand where the teams are coming from here and try and figure out a way to try and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't feel like it's like negligence, really, when the teams are following the registrar rules and doing the things that they're used to doing, and then that wasn't quite exactly what they were supposed to be doing. It feels like they're losing out on like tons of alums for whom this entire thing is about on a technicality when they're like, I literally emailed with I'm not going to name the team, but a top team, a team that has a top 10 program that had no idea that they had even done anything wrong. They said, everything looks right on our end. They didn't know.
It's a troubling situation, and I'm morbidly curious as to how it's going to unfold from here. But I hope that it ends up with people being able to play and without USAU having to, put in a bunch of overtime to make that happen. I certainly hope that there's some sort of convenient solution, but chances are that it's going to require somebody to do some sacrificing, whether it's USA Ultimate or the teams themselves. It'd be great if USA Ultimate could push the labor onto the team somehow. I'm sure they'd be happy to do it if that's what got their teammates in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say in the bigger sense, by the way, this is the first time that USAU is doing digital rosters, right? That they had emails from registrars instead of sending it in to Colorado.
Oh my gosh!
Springs
imagine if this was all being
paper.
done via paper and snail mail right now.
Which is good, right? That's a step in the right direction. But I think this does highlight for me the need for like massive technical overhaul. USA Ultimate has been at a technology deficit for some time. They've overhauled the front end of the website, but just conversations with folks who know about how this all works, like it sounds like a nightmare, and it needs to. I feel like this should be a major priority in the next like strategic plan. USA Ultimate should hire, as soon as is feasible, like 2 or 3 software engineers and let them like build the tools that are going to make the life of the staff easier, but also, rebuild the back end of the website that makes the job for organizers way easier and for teams and players way easier. So much of this would be solved with technical solutions that make things more sort of easy to understand, as opposed to having to read a lot of fine print. So I don't know. I feel bad. I feel really bad for the teams. I also feel bad for USAU getting this kind of like foisted on them at the last minute before regionals starts, and like teams are finding out about this today.
It stinks for everybody. That's for sure.
All right. Well, let's talk about something more fun. Top 25 college programs. The rankings are out for D1. D3 dropping Thursday and Friday. Looking forward to it. So let's talk a little D1 college top 25, Keith. I got to say, I got a little bone to pick with number 1 in the women's division.
I love it.
Number 1 in the women's division, Carleton Syzygy. And this, regardless of what happens with the roster at regionals, I mean, they're going to make nationals. They'll be fine.
You say that about Carleton. I mean, it hasn't been a problem for Syzygy generally, but
let's assume they get to play with their players, right? We just kind of have to assume everybody gets to play with their people.
I mean, they're
Carleton
so deep,
is one of the teams.
You might be able to chop them in half and they still make nationals.
They are missing 6 players from their team roster on their conference's roster, so it could affect them. But they are ahead of North Carolina Pleiades. I just don't think I can. I don't think I can buy that, Keith. We just watched Phoenix, which was driven by a bunch of the players on this UNC roster, almost take down Fury in semifinals at the Club National Championships. What more do you need to see? I mean, I know Carleton's a good team. They're definitely a good team. But I feel like UNC was the favorite in 2020. And if anything, I feel like this UNC roster is more experienced, older, and better.
I mean, you may feel like UNC was the favorite in 2020, but Carleton was the number 1 ranked team by the time that the season ended, if I'm not mistaken.
You are right.
So you can feel that way, but that wasn't what the power rankings said at the time. This Carleton team has a ton of firepower, and UNC is playing without their best player. Anworth is still not back. And I don't think she's going to be able to play this season. And so, that's a pretty big difference maker when you look at who's on this Carleton roster. Yeah, was Carly Campana playing with Phoenix? No, but don't you think she probably could have? Don't you think she could? She has the talent to be on that squad. I think so. I don't know why so few Carleton players. What Caitlin Ear and Carly Campana were up to, Emma Chin in the offseason, but. This is a deep Carleton team. They have great recruits. Victoria Gray is going to be, in the running for Rookie of the Year. Both of these teams are really 1A and 1B, and we'll get the fun of debating about them all year. And I think it'll be much like it was in 2020, a question of not only which one of these teams is the top team, but is there anybody who can get in there and try and break it up? In 2020 we had Tufts, but they look like they're probably going to take a big step back. So will somebody else be able to step up and challenge them? But who knows what's going to go on with this crazy
Syzygy
season.
feels like a college team. UNC feels like a club team, Keith. I don't think it's even going to be that close. Put it in the book right now. Put it in the book right now.
This is very
UNC
bold.
To win the title, and they're going to win easy.
UNC wins the title easy. Charlie, you wanted to start this off hot, huh? You didn't
put it in the book.
You didn't want to come out cold at all. I love that.
What else stands out to you in the top 10, Keith?
There's some really intriguing teams up and down the top 10. I think that you may have kind of a similar conversation in the men's division. UNC Dark Side. Obviously, there's a core of this team that was just on the club championship team. But basically, the entirety of Mama Bird was out at the club championships playing with their own same club. So, is there a chance that maybe Colorado should be the number 1 in the men's division? I've seen it put forth within our own staff that Colorado, after Lotus's performance at the club championships, where they looked like a legit team. I mean, this was not, some scrub team that
they did
got
finish
in
last.
Sure, but did you feel like they looked like they didn't belong there?
No, they're legit.
They were a legit team. I mean, should they be number 1 over Darkside?
Case to be made. I think the trump card for Darkside is that they've been there before. They've won within the last few years. They've been that program. Now, do I think Colorado has the horses to win that game? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. I mean, Matthew Agee, Alex Atkins, Quinn Finer. I mean, this is a really good team. And that doesn't even get into remember how good their rookies were in 2020. Right? We saw their rookies as being some of their best players. Calvin Stoughton, Danny Landisman, those guys are a year and a half older at this point. This team's super dangerous. I mean, the thing that I know about Colorado is they're going to be super deep. Can UNC match that depth? I think the top end, I probably still lean slightly towards UNC. The depth department, I go towards Colorado. How does the chemistry of Colorado playing together basically as Lotus, how does that translate into this college series? It does feel like the kind of thing where we could see Colorado really look good and tear through teams.
Where do you let's go through each division. I think this will be an interesting exercise. Where do you draw the line at teams who you think can contend for a national championship in each division?
In the men's division, I'm trying to decide if I want to give Texas credit or not. I think I do. I think I'm going to say 7 deep. I'm going to give Texas, Pittsburgh, Brown, Washington, Carleton, Colorado, and UNC a shot. I can see arguing for leaving out Texas, but I really like this roster. I mean, they're solid. The Chambers brothers, Vinay Valsaraj is going to be playing at this December College Nationals. Jake Raddick. I think they're good. I don't know if they're good enough to win, quarter semis finals against this these other teams that are talking about here, but I think they have a puncher's chance. Everybody else, totally legitimate opportunity. Pitt, the Ing brothers are going to be unbelievable. John Randolph maybe was the best. Is he going to be the best player at college nationals?
Oh, it's going to be really interesting to see who's going to be the best player
for
at college
Brown.
nationals.
I mean, Brown is not deep, but they have really good top level talent. We've seen teams ride that before. I mean, Harvard did it with John Stubbs and Mark Vandenberg. They went all the way to the final. Washington, really good team. Carleton, I mean, you can have fair questions about like why this team has underperformed their talent, but the talent is absolutely legitimate. I mean, they have like legit elite club dudes on that roster. Their top 7 is unbelievable. I just don't know if they're going to put the pieces together. And no Joe White.
Are you worried at all by their loss at conferences?
I don't. The same way I don't make anything about club conferences, club sectionals. I'm not making anything about college conferences.
Yeah, I have trouble figuring out what to make of college conferences. On the one hand, it's like your one tune-up tournament that you're going to get.
It's true.
So, I can see teams trying to take it seriously, but it's hard when it's so close in proximity to the club championships.
Yeah, I don't love to see it, but I would not be surprised if they were sitting a lot of guys.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
What do you agree with my assessment here? 7 deep.
I'm not as charitable for Texas, although I see the case. I think that they're a totally legit team. I think they're a really good team, but just haven't seen it from them yet. I have not seen that level of play from them at any point. So while I believe in the talent, I don't know if they've taken their licks yet in that way that these other top 6 have. So I think I would have it at 6 in the men's division, but I mean, you could easily convince me that any of these 6 could win the title or be in the final.
Women's division, what say you?
It's hard. I mean, it's hard to look past that top 2 and feel super confident. I mean, I think Washington has the chops, and I kind of like, I can envision UCSB doing it in that UCSB way. Like we're just going to ride a couple players, ride them into the ground, and have a system that you can't stop. But I'm not even confident that UCSB can make it out of the Southwest. So given their range of outcomes, I just don't feel like I can quite put them in that conversation. So for me, I think it's 3 teams.
I'm not even sure I'm willing to give Washington credit, Keith.
That's understandable, and that's not to discredit Washington. It's team. To the credit of North Carolina and Carleton, who look like, I mean, these teams look like they could make the bracket at the club championships.
They are unbelievable. They are unbelievably good. They were unbelievably good in 2019. They took steps forward in 2020. We were on the path to watch them play in the national final in 2020. Obviously, COVID happened, but they're back. They are mostly with their teams that were going to be in that final in 2020, and I would be very surprised if they didn't meet in the final in 2021, barring injuries or absences or whatever.
All right, I've got a bet for you then.
Okay.
All right, which is more likely, I guess, that both divisions are won by the same school, or that a team outside of UNC, Carleton, that a team from UNC or Carleton wins the title at all
in the women's division.
Either division, I guess.
Okay, I mean so Colorado could throw a wrench. Okay, so give it to me again concisely.
So that the same school wins the championship in both divisions, or that a team outside of Colorado or Carleton or UNC wins either division.
I think it's more likely that the same school wins both.
Wow. I don't know. I'm like trying to scroll back to see when the last time it happened was.
I get the option of Carleton or UNC
right,
as very plausible outcomes. So I already told you that I think UNC is going to win in the women's division. So now I just need the number 1 ranked team in the men's division to win.
Exactly.
It's plausible enough to me.
And hey, you know what? The Colorado women, they're no slouches. Depending on how the roster thing shakes out for them, they could be a pretty good team. They got a lot of returners.
They're solid
and great
They're
recruits.
Definitely solid.
So I'm really trying to find the last time that the same school won in both divisions, if it's even happened. I feel like I should just know this, but 2002 maybe. Nope. I don't know if this has happened.
I'm gonna hit you some more takes, some overrateds and some underrateds. Let's do it.
Oh right? Yeah, okay. So who's over and under in their top 25 standings?
Underrated Michigan Magnum.
Okay.
Number 11. I mean, I guess I'm not sure who I would put them ahead of, but I just feel like
always the question.
This was like a clear top 10 team. I mean, I think I put them ahead of Georgia. I think I put them ahead of NC State. I actually think Cal Poly's also a little underrated here.
Who are you putting them ahead of?
NC State.
Just NC State. Okay. So
I think
really it sounds like you think NC State's over.
Michigan should be at 9. But I'm saying Michigan's a top 10 team. It's a snub to have them outside the top 10. We saw really good stuff from them, and they have a lot of players who just got a lot of experience this club season. I just feel like people sleep on them because they're kind of like a blue collar team that doesn't have all this polish. They looked really good in early 2020, and I think that they're going to be really solid.
I agree. I actually probably would make Michigan inside the top 10 too. But I think it could be dangerous to sleep on NC State. I'm a big Trevor Lynch believer. I had him on my unofficial third team ballot last year, and they returned pretty much everybody. So I think NC State's going to be legit. But I'm positive on this Michigan team, and I think that they're a team they're a dark horse semifinals contender to me. I mean, they're legit.
What's up? Why is Maryland at 14th?
Maryland, I've heard really positive things about Maryland, and part of it's because they have a lot of guys who played high quality club this year. They've got a duo of guys from Truck Stop, Jeremy Hess and Colin McLaughlin. Then they have guys playing on vault this year, and then a bunch of guys who played together on a local club team, like a regional level club team.
It's just they didn't do enough for me in the last couple seasons to feel like they should be this high up.
I don't know, man. I've heard really positive things about them, and they're in a very competitive region, so it's going to be tough. You see Wilmington, who's also an Atlantic Coast team, at 15 right behind them. So they're in a really difficult spot, but they're a very talented team. Another underrated team. What do you think of Wisconsin? All the way at 25. I think we got chirped on Twitter when the rankings came out, which is right on brand for Wisconsin in the men's division. But they don't have a lot of stars. I don't think they
never have a lot of stars,
top end guys. But yeah, that's the deal with them. That's who Wisconsin is these days. And I think that their young players are actually going to be quite good. So I can really see them outperforming 25. The hard part is that they don't have a lot of bids, so they don't have a lot of chances to outperform that. The North Central has 2 bids, and
no Minnesota
and Carleton in there.
Nope, no Minnesota, man, my friend. No Minnesota. They're not playing regionals.
Oh, really? They're 13 in the power rankings. Well, that's going to open the door for Wisconsin then.
Well, they're very good, but they can't. I can't remember if it's that their alumni can't play or that they're just straight up cannot play. But I think they're just not going to even attend, as far as I know.
If they're not even going to attend regionals, then I think Wisconsin's a lock to move up, and that's probably
that's
at
true.
This point, just by
that
getting
doesn't necessarily mean they should be higher than 25. I think the issue with Wisconsin, I mean, this is it. I have a hard time imagining this team coming in nationals and going to quarters, because they need the time and reps to get all these unpolished players up to speed on the game. They don't get that. They get 2 months with them. They have some nice players for sure. Ted Shuey, solid, but they're going to be solid. I don't know that they really deserve to be a lot higher than this. They finished 2020 ranked 24th in the power rankings and 29th in the USAU rankings.
I'm not saying it's obvious, but I think that Nico Roundabout is someone I think could be really good this year, and I think that their young players are going to really step up and help them have that Wisconsin depth that they're known for, and I expect to see them be better than some of the teams in front of them.
Do not sleep on Northeastern 16. Do not sleep. They almost knocked out Sprout as a club team at Northeast Regionals.
I did, Rod.
In the game to go. They're very good. And they add Gus Norbaum, who's an unbelievable player out of William and Mary. And, you add him to Ben Field and the rest of this team that's been playing together for years. I mean, I think they're pretty good.
They are dangerous. They're certainly capable of upsetting some teams and outperforming this spot, but I also could see them being a little flimsy. This is not a team that has a ton of top level experience, and I think that could be troublesome for them. I think that's true of a lot of these teams. Once you get out of that real top tier, once you get past like Ohio State, probably is where I start to feel a little wishy-washy with some of these teams. I could see Stanford doing really well. Kevin Tien, Simon Covington. I could see UMass. Orion Cable's going to be a real problem for people.
He's going to be a problem.
But they're not quite as deep, I think, as they're used to being, and that could be a real challenge for them. I could see Colorado State being pretty good. So UCLA, Riley Kirkman Davis. I mean, you want to talk about people who are going to be a problem. Riley Kirkman Davis is going to be a problem.
Big problem.
But, all these teams I think have both high ceilings and floors below even where they're ranked.
I'm not going to lie. I'm super excited for this college nationals.
I don't even know what to expect. Regionals is going to be – we've never gone to regionals as such a black box.
It's true.
I look at the women's division and Georgia's at number 12. They were unranked at the end of last year, but they had a nice fall. So we're back on – we were all looking for reasons to get back on the Marie Pervier chain.
Let's just talk about this, though. They were looking solid in the fall, right? They've been looking solid up to this point. They play UNC 13-4.
I mean, that UNC just makes teams look
Come on. UNC lock.
Wow.
You heard it here first.
I know the teams. There's two teams that I'm particularly interested in. Well, I guess three, because we got to talk App State if we're going to talk the women's division. Look at these surprise brands in the women's division power rankings. Chicago, number 14. Vermont, number 15. App State, number 17. I mean, App State is the most off the board team I think we've ever put in the top 25.
The Appalachian, hang on for this. Honest to God, Keith, I thought it was a typo. I corrected the typo. I was about to update, and I looked closer at the logo, and I was like, "No, that is an N."
No,
they're the Appalachian State Nonads.
Nonads. Their men's team is the Nomads.
The Nomads. They are the Nonads.
So you could put it together.
Will USAU let them slap that on a jersey at college?
Is it a real word? Can they say it means something else?
No, that's not a real word.
Come on, what if it means something? You don't know.
That's an old school name, I'll tell you what. They went 4-1 at conferences. They beat UNC Wilmington. They beat NC State.
This is a team that finished 7th in their conference last year. They were 0-5. And here they are at number 17 in power rankings.
But tell us why, Keith. Tell us what has this team in the top 25.
Margaret Berry.
Here she is in college.
I remember seeing her in high school and be like, it is a crying shame this person is not going to play College Ultimate. And 2 years later, she appears on a College Ultimate roster with her sister, Abigail. I mean, Margaret Berry was one of the best high school players in the country 2 years ago.
100%.
Had a triangle area player, was a big piece of the Warhawks. Did really well at a high school national invite. I mean, she was in the backfield with Alyssa Earhart and looked just as good as Alyssa Earhart, who's now one of the stars of Carleton. So do not sleep. Do I think that they can carry forward what they did at conferences? I'm not quite sure. We project their conference to be really good, and they went 4-1 at conferences. They beat UNC Wilmington, NC State. Those are good teams. They put up 5 goals on UNC, which is pretty hard to do. So, I mean, I don't know what to expect from this team, but I know that Margaret Berry is really damn good, and she's used to being in a situation where she's carrying a lot of the load. So this is a team that I don't, could they be a shock Nationals attendee? How crazy is it going to be if Appalachian State gets to Nationals?
I'll tell you what, it's correct. And how about Ohio Stacked Cats? Keith, I have never spoken that team name. I've never said it. I've never seen it. There they are, the Ohio Stacked Cats, number 23 in the rankings. What's going on in the Ohio Valley? I
mean, if you just read the first part, Ohio State, and you're like, oh, Ohio State, but you finish it out. It's Stacked Cats. I mean, the Ohio University, Athens, Ohio, represent. They've looked nice in the series. They've been a team. They were 27th in the USAU rankings last year. I remember looking at them and thinking like, oh, are they gonna? If they put it together, could they like sneak into the bid conversation? It was possible, but they ended up doing pretty poorly in 2019. But Ohio State is basically like fallen off for the year. I don't know if they're just focusing on the spring or if they are just a little bereft of talent after the pandemic. But Ohio had a really nice conference performance. They've got some club experience on the team. So, do I think that they're going to be like a really deep team? No, but I think that's going to be the case for some of these teams at the back end of the top 25 that are going to be riding a couple of vets, and that could carry you a long way. So whether it's your teams like Appalachian State or, top 15 teams, Vermont, Kennedy McCarthy could legitimately be the best player in the women's division. That's possible,
wow.
Right?
Now there's a take.
She could be.
I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't know if I'm quite there yet.
Look, she is like borderline being talked. She's being talked about to make an all-club team. Our all-club awards are not out yet, but like she's in that conversation. I mean,
it's true.
Look at the numbers. So if you're able to do that at the club level, imagine what you could do at the college level. The question is, they lost a lot of depth from Vermont, so it's really about to be, I think a thin rotation. If that team decides that they want to gun for it in the fall, if they are like, hey, we got program to build, we need to focus on how we're going to do in the spring and the spring after this.
That's not the attitude. That's not the attitude. You got to go chase the ship. You got to chase the ship.
Yeah,
you got to chase the ring.
Could they win the region? Sure. Tufts lost a ton of talent. So
by the way, for Ohio Valley has 3 bids in the women's division.
Oh yeah.
They got the bonus bid on a tiebreaker with the Northwest. So they had the equal number of participating teams at conferences. So the conference roster sizes ended up coming in as the tiebreaker, and the Ohio Valley won. So 3 bids.
And Ohio State is not in the top 25. So you have Pitt at number 9 at the Ohio Valley, and you got Ohio at number 23. And then there's some other team that's going to nationals. Ohio State, Carnegie Mellon, Case Western. I don't know who it's going to be, but somebody else is going to nationals. They're not even in the top 25.
Well, it's very exciting. Can't wait to see what we got right, what we got wrong. It's all going to start playing out this weekend at regionals.
Us get something wrong? There's no way.
No, never. 100% right.
Especially not this year. All the information was so available. It's very obvious.
So we're going to take a quick break. We've got more college discussion coming up in a little bit. But next, Mike DeNardis from Raleigh Ring of Fire, head coach, joins us here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Joining us now on Deep Look is Raleigh Ring of Fire and Raleigh Flyers head coach Mike DeNardis, whose neck's got to be getting a little heavy with the gold hanging around it. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. Always great to have you on the show. What's this last, whatever it's been, 3 months been like for you?
I mean, it's been awesome. It is the culmination of so many things we've done for, I guess it was since 14, building up the program and finally kind of getting over the hump in, a 3-month span twice is pretty sweet. But yeah, it's been great. It's been a really good experience, and, the culmination of so many good things and so many years of multiple programs, trying to climb the mountain and getting both at the same time is awesome for so many people.
How do you feel like the second one felt contrasted compared to winning in the ADL?
It would, some of the people were different, which was interesting because it was they got to experience that, John and Liam and Dylan and, Jack and Ryan. And, but yeah, the first one was sweet because it felt really like weight lifted off of you. And then this one felt a lot like playing with house money because the majority of the people had done it, and they came back and they were like, all right, well, we just have to play one tournament and play well. And we did. So it was really nice. And I mean, both the finals were amazing too, which is really, really sweet to play your best in the finals of both events was the best part of it, I think, for so many people.
I want to get into the finals in a second, but people say that winning the USAU Club Championships is the hardest tournament in the world to win. Did it feel harder to win that than it did to win the AUDL title?
No, because the AUDL was just longer and there was more struggles built into it. If you step back and think about it, if we only had 3 teams that made the playoffs, we wouldn't even be in the playoffs. So like having those struggles against DC and, the New York game for the second time in, 2 seasons, we had like kind of a snatch the defeat from the jaws of victory or something like that. It goes. And then, even Atlanta, like gave us a tough game initially because all those new guys that was our first AUDL game ever. So, it felt like more fulfilling to me because we like it was a longer climb to the mountaintop. Especially the way we did it, where we went and played DC and, after losing to them twice and then beating them and then playing Chicago, not having the greatest game in the world, but having to claw back on that one. And then finally like playing a New York team where I'm assuming most people thought we were going to lose and then playing like almost a perfect game of Ultimate. It felt really good, but I think, in terms of players, I think a lot of players were very more fulfilled with the ring victory just because of the history, 30 years of a program and so many people that have gone through the years of playing and then not getting a championship. It felt really good from, there's dudes from 30 years ago that we recognized, when you guys were giving us shout outs that, one of Ring's first finals, like Augie is, played a final in like 2002. And here we are in 2020, whatever year it is. I can't even remember with the pandemic, but like, 2021. And it's like, it's 20 years later, and that's not even, Augie wasn't even like one of the first Ring people, right? It's like a 30-year program. So it felt so good for so many of those people. I think a lot of people felt more fulfilled by it. But in terms of like the difficulty of it, it felt like the AUDL was more difficult to get there. We really had Revolver as a test, and then that was it until the finals. So little easier path for the, and then of course sectionals and regionals, which wasn't too tough. So felt easier.
Augie, a newly minted Hall of Famer, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They just got
well deserved.
Yeah.
So fun fact, I played Masters with Augie in 2012, and I was a receiver, and I had never gotten, like, the last few years of my club when my vertical was like gone, I was just getting super frustrated because people would just hang me out to dry over and over and over. And I would never, like, I'd cut deep and I'd be open by like 5 yards and I'd never get the goal because people would hang me outside. And then I played Masters with Augie and he put it in my breadbasket every time. Like every time. I've never played with a thrower that was so like perfect in placement of throws, where I'd just be like, oh, it's right in my chest every time, and I run under it and score. So anyway, it's a shout out to him. He was amazing.
That was probably the thing that got him in. Like that was the final thing. They're like, yeah, I remember he just put Mike D right in the basket.
No, it's just a testament to how great of a thrower that guy was or is still.
So getting back to the team and the titles. Plural here. Do you think Ring could have won this club championship had there not been an AUDL season this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had all the pieces to do it. I only hesitate because I think the shortness of our season helped us because we went through all the problems and the corrections during the AUDL season. So you don't know what the path would look like if you had a couple club tournaments, like what twists and turns you would have taken if we played at Pro Champs and didn't have success or had success. And so that's my only hesitation. I think the pieces are there. Like the pieces were there the whole time, and it was just trying to figure out how quickly we could integrate them. So, but I learned so much about some of the players that contributed in big ways and small ways in the pro season that during the club season, I felt really comfortable with where they were and how we could use them. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we were, I think we took the right path and we had success by taking it. So,
I mean, we had Saul Yannick on the show and we were talking about how he moved to offense and what might come in the ring season, and like having him and Matt Gucciahannis on the O-line instead of the D-line like you did in 2019 and where they'd played, you kind of flip-flop your handlers between O and D. And, it's like, oh, can Ring like figure it out in such a short time? Obviously the answer was yes. It seemed seamless. I mean, you plug in Ryan Osgar, who goes off for a double-double and like has 2 turnovers. Now, I don't know how official these stats are, but like he was obviously unbelievable.
Yeah.
It just, you have this amazing offensive unit that is able to take what was working in the AUDL playoffs, particularly and over the course of the season, and then just directly bring that to the club field, which, I mean, it seemed like it could work, but I didn't know that it was going to work this well. I mean, did you know it was going to work this well?
Well, I mean, I knew because of the people that were involved. Like, I knew that we would transition with Saul and Matt driving, whatever our cutting core looked like. I think we would transition into be in a good spot as long as we could fill the pieces in the right way. And knowing that we've had Jack in the past as a handler or a hybrid, like we knew we had him as kind of a safety valve too if we needed him. So it was essentially like trying to figure out how we work with like a 9-person O-line or 10-person O-line, getting those pieces like fit in especially in like big games and bracket games. It's really hard to like run an offense when you have extra pieces. But, Allen got to play a little more D. Terrence wasn't there the first day. So, the first couple of days. So we figured it out on the fly in that respect. But like the big thing was like, I knew because we had the 2 drivers of the offense that worked so well, in 2019, I really learned like what we're playing these 2 guys on D and they're great defenders, but they score every time they're on offense. It's like, why are we playing them on defense all the time? Like, wouldn't it be better if we just scored all the time and then they played great defense if we turned it and we needed a D? And so, I definitely faced some resistance, Matt and Saul definitely pushed back a little bit on that, but you just like see it. They're just like, like Matt said in the interview, it's like mind meld, right? It's like they can throw 50 passes to each other in a point to get us out of some trouble spaces. And as long as we integrate those other pieces, and like Ryan is about as perfect of like a piece as you can get in terms of just like dropping him in there and what he's going to do. And we already knew what Jack could do. So it was pretty easy. The thing was balance, and we figured it out along the way. We figured out how to balance people, and I think our O-line was okay with a couple of people playing a little less and just having like, highlight them when they're on the field and and just work it like that.
There's been a lot made about the connection between the Flyers and Ring and how that may have led to the success that you've had this year, and what the connections that other club teams have with their semi-pro teams or lack in some cases, how that affected.
Who are you talking about? I have no idea.
I mean, there's not more than one. It's not just one team, not just the team we faced off with in the final, but there's some other ones as well. I feel like with the way that the calendar broke down, I mean, this was a year in which you didn't have any required tournaments that you had to play for club. So it made it a lot easier, I imagine, to have a schedule that worked out where you could have everybody playing in the semi-pro season and then still get into the club season okay. Is this something you see the Carolina scene trying to replicate year in and year out, even with a full club season schedule? Do you think you're going to see other cities try and do the same thing? Or people texting you, they're like, hey, how'd you do it? How did we get this too?
No text yet, but it's going to be particularly hard next year. And we had a pretty long conversation about it like 2 days ago, how it works next year, because we have Worlds too. So it's like almost a triple peak, right? It's like you got AUDL season, you got Worlds kind of stuffed in the middle there, and then you have club season. And our thing's like we have to treat this like almost like an entity and not 2 separate teams. It's like you have to figure out how to balance it with like the individuals. And it's difficult because you have 2 different rule sets. And especially with Worlds dropped in for us, it's like you have 2 different rule sets and you have maybe some different people, right? Like Jack and Ryan
different rule sets.
Right, three different rule
now it's
sets.
Like 2.2, 2.5 rule sets.
So it's really hard. So it's like you have to just get the right people in place and make sure your systems are sound and like treat it as like this kind of blob, I think. And that's the only way it's going to work. Like if you try to separate them right now, and I think you saw it a little bit with certain teams, and I alluded to New York and as a joke, but like when you have like 3 or 4 or 5 pieces that aren't in one and are in the other, the only reason that really worked for us is because we knew those pieces forever. And like Ryan was truly the only new piece. So it's like the only way you're going to have that work is like, is not to separate it and try to like move along as like this blob. And if you have people that don't want to play in the ADL or don't have people that don't want to play in USAU or can't, or, whatever, you just have to like still get them to come and practice with you and do all those things. And if they don't want to play in AUDL games or whatever, like that's just how it has to be. It's the only way it's going to work. Like that's my, my feel on it. And I would hope most of the players buy in, and they did this year, and we had really great success. We had 22 players that played AUDL that played on club and very small crossover, and it worked really well. And it's like, you have a blueprint for it. So why are we going to try to go back? Like if we have to go to tournaments, we can still do that, but like treat this as like one entity that you plow through all these things and just make sure you manage your time, manage your practices, manage how you structure things right through that time period. And it's not easy. Like we've done it and it's not easy.
So let's talk about the final. Incredibly high level game, incredible offense, 2 great D-lines. I mean, Pony's D-line was one of the best of the tournament. It ends up being 1 break apiece, and you win on serve. And that's not to say that there wasn't lots of pressure and lots of amazing moments and some huge Ds, but this was just an exceptionally high level of play. What was your experience as a coach in that game? Did you feel like you were pulling levers and stuff, or was it really just like the guys were out there and it was just everything was humming?
Yeah, I think I felt it in the AUDL final, and I felt it in this game where, I've traditionally coached defense, and I've only really coached offense for like 2 years. And like 2019 was my first kind of foray into it, and then this year for AUDL, and then for the series. My philosophy is if it's not broke, don't fix it. So if a team is not giving us difficulty in what they're doing and the looks they're giving us, I'm going to just stay the course and just continue to steadily like run similar sets and give the guys similar directives and how to score. And, in the AUDL final, I felt a little more challenged because there were times when they, that Empire team was very switch oriented, and you have to like think about that because you have Babbitt humming deep and you have Cats in the underspace, and you have like similar components with Pony. But I felt like the directive for Pony's D was play hard, match up D, and get blocks, like pressure and get blocks. And they did it really early. They pressured us really early in the game, but then once we got through that like kind of tough period of work, like there was like one point where we worked the disc a lot. After that, it felt pretty comfortable. So they weren't really changing anything. But if I was, I always think about what my opponent's thinking about. And like if I was Brian, I wouldn't run junks against our offense because it's just we shred them, right? So it's like try to make us throw deep, try to get us in trouble. But like I felt like we were getting outs anytime they'd even put any kind of pressure on us. So so it was like I thought after a certain point in time, we didn't feel a lot of pressure. We weren't getting a lot of like, any of them. We weren't getting blown up in any unders. We weren't, they were close, but we weren't really making any mistakes. So I didn't feel like we needed to change anything based on like the pressure. And I thought the guys were performing really well. So yeah, that was part of it, right? Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it wasn't broke that whole game. So, and then they tried to throw junk at the end, and, it definitely, as much as Matt likes to humble brag, like it definitely was a different look and gave us a little bit of like challenge, but we got through it. So, but like, yeah, I mean, if I was in Brian's shoes, like it's hard to plan for this offense, because if you're a defensive coach, you want to throw junks, but if the team's better at junk than matchup, then you're going to just match up as much as you can, I think, and just kind of tweak matchups. It was what he did. It just didn't work.
It's kind of crazy that Ring wins a championship with one break. I mean, like, rewind even like 3 years, and like that's a nonsensical statement. A Ring is going to win the championship by getting one break in the final against Pony.
Yeah.
So what was keeping your defense from finding success? Now, I know they got some blocks late. It really did feel like late in the second half that, it could have been a 2 or 3 point game if a couple of things drop in, but they didn't. Obviously, Chris Kotcher had that amazing D on Eric Taylor to prevent a score. But, there wasn't a lot of pressure from your D on their O. What were they doing well to keep you from getting those blocks and those breaks?
I think resets were great on both sides. Jimmy's always like a difficult person to dispossess if he's like doing this, like playing small ball, because he's just so big and it's so hard to like, he can throw around people. He's just got an amazing break throws. He's really smart. He catches resets. Like he's just big, so you can't really like out physical him in space and get blocks. So, and adding Randolph, like Randolph crushed UNC in the finals in 2019. And like, it's just like, you can tell that he's just an amazing small ball player. And, those two guys are just pieces that are really hard to dispossess in like reset space. And that's kind of what happened. Like we were close and our systems worked well, but, they're just their reset system's really good. Like they do a lot of the old, like, the stuff that, I mean, I'm assuming Jimmy brought from like Mama Bird, and, Schottler brought from Jam. And, I think like that stuff, both teams were really good in that aspect of the game. So that's, we got a lot of our Ds from like long shots, or, Elijah made that one hero play on that D. And, like in that game, when you have really good reset teams, like teams that can just possess the disc in small spaces, it's just really hard to like dispossess them. But I will say, like, that Kotcher D is amazing, but it's like a 1 in 50 or something. Like that was maybe more, maybe 100. Like that was a ridiculous D. Like Eric's an amazing deep thrower. That throw was on point. I was like, I had my hands up. I was like, that's an easy goal. And then Kotcher makes this ridiculous play. And then we just had some like weird wonky turnovers in the short field. Like the throw at the end of the game that John threw to Noah, like just led him a little too far. It's like, probably shouldn't really happen. Like we should just be able to punch that one in. But it certainly did, it certainly caused us to have a little more pressure to like keep holding, but we did, which is awesome. Like, we felt really confident to do that. So, I don't really have an answer as to why, like, other than that small reset space stuff, it is like the main reason why it was hard to like dispossess them.
Try and go back to the mind space that you're in before the game starts. If you win the flip without knowing how that game's going to go, what do you take?
I take offense every time. Like I would never not take offense there, because like we've had some communication snafus, like Noah and I in the past, when like he'll just be like, what do you think we should do here? And I'll be like, well, I think we should take offense. There's no wind. And he'll like choose D. And it's like, I don't know. I just felt it. And they're like, all right, fine. But like, I would never, there's no wind. Like there's no wind. I want the extra possession. I don't like, I know there's like a psychological aspect to it that like people want to start on D. So if they get that break, like get that break into half, like you get the disc. It's like, yeah, but you want the disc first. Like you just do. It's just statistics. And if there was like a 10-mile-an-hour wind, it changes things. but there isn't. So, I just choose offense. I mean, I definitely I was watching the flip. If we won, we would have chosen offense.
Were you surprised that they chose defense?
No, not at all. I smiled when they did, because inside, and it smelled externally. But I was pretty sure they were going to choose defense, because it's just I think the psychology of it is we would need that break and we want to put pressure on them early and do all these things. And like I said, they did. They almost got what they wanted. But I just still think about the statistics of it. It's a winless environment. I just want the extra possession if I can.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the 85-minute cap?
I think it's lame that we don't get to play an entire game, but it's just part of the rule set that you have to play in that particular tournament, and it sucks. And we all want to play the entirety of the game, but it's just what it is. I knew it was going to be I didn't know, but I assumed it was going to be a short game, and I would hope they revisit that rule, and so we can play to 15 and get all the possessions we can into a game. But I don't know. I didn't really dwell on it too much. Maybe because we won. Maybe I'd be grumbling about it if we lost.
75.
Right? Yeah, let's just do games to 3. Game to 3.
As soon as we're ahead, that's when the cap goes on.
Hey, look, that's how it is in a lot of tournaments. A lot of coaches, time warps differently based on whether you're winning or losing. Right. Suddenly, halftime needs to be 5 minutes.
Right.
While we're on sort of hot button topic issues, Keith and I have been beating the drum. Saturday night finals go Wednesday to Saturday nationals. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's just idiotic not to do that. You should have Saturday finals.
That's a strong take.
Sunday. It is you know why? Because I've done it in the ADL and it's horrible. A Sunday game is horrible. Nobody wants a Sunday game. Everyone wants to play on Saturday and Friday nights. We never play on Sundays anymore. We would rather drive to Atlanta on Thursday night and play a Friday night game than play a Sunday afternoon game, because we know it stinks for the fans. It's especially at nationals, like you guys said, everyone's bombed on Saturday night and then get up at 10 a.m. to watch the finals. It's or just go home. It's just we're already taking a day off of work. Just take another day off of work and do the thing everyone wants to do. And then the best part is you have Sunday to do whatever you want. That's another thing that goes unsaid. I know, this is going to sound lame just because we've done it, but it's when you make finals and win, you're I was on a flight at 9:10. I flew out drunk at 10:30 on a red eye Sunday night.
Oh God.
I got to hang out for 6 hours, and maybe I take Monday off work, but if you have that Saturday thing built in, you don't have to do that. It's an extra day and you just go. I don't think anyone's going to care about taking another day off. I mean, very few people are going to care about taking an extra day off of work, and it would be just everything you ask for, a Friday and Saturday night kind of semis and finals.
And every team can plan to have their end of season stuff on Sunday, regardless of whether you win or lose. Being able to say okay, Sunday morning we're all going to hang out, and then people can fly out, but at least we'll get to say goodbye to the
Absolutely.
team proper. That, I think
the Ulti-World Disc Golf Challenge Sunday morning. My God, what a layup.
Exactly.
We could put together some ultimate centric challenges. I've got some ultimate games. We used to do ultimate.
I'll
Olympics
play a threes tournament with you guys. We'll run a threes tournament.
There we go. There we go. I wish I could hold up one of my disc golf Ulti-World putters right now. They're in the mail. I don't have one to show you.
What a marketing!
They're really nice.
I feel like one of the last things I got to make sure I get this in. One of the players I feel that everybody was talking about after the final, and even for the folks who were following the ADL season, after the ADL season, and even if you go all the way back to the last college season, when our offensive player of the year in 2020, but the guy feels like he's been on a crazy trajectory. Anders Youngst. So What have you seen in his growth to get him to this point, and how good could he be? Like, how much more room is there?
In terms of room, like, I mean, just throwing stuff, throwing with big marks, throwing in positions where like he leans back when he's getting pressured. That's stuff he's working on, and that's stuff he needs to work on. But like, it's such a small thing in, a guy that I call him Super Schlockett. I know people compare him to Joel Schlockett, but like, like that's a great comparison. But like, he also just has an amazing burst and speed, and like that's. Something Schlockett was pretty fast, but like he was a grinder more than like a deep cutter too. And Durs is just like, I think just traditionally he's just been vastly underrated. I underrated him when he came to UNC. Like I thought he was going to be like good, but not great. And it's funny because I'm small, and the two people I think I underrated the most coming out of into college is Nathan Kwan and Durs. And it's hilarious, but it's hilarious because both those guys are like UNC legends now. And I'm like supposed to be like a person that knows what the hell he's doing. And like, those are the two guys, and I'm a small guy and I know how to analyze like small people. And those turn out to be like two of the greatest small players ever. But yeah, like I think he just, he's just got, he's got a great killer instinct. He's got a great burst. He's got great speed, and he's got really good throws. So how much better can he get? I mean, he's got to like look at him this year. Like, if he gets any better, it's trouble. Like for anybody that guards him, it's trouble for. I think he has some growth to do, but like in terms of like upside, he's maxing a lot of those variables out right now. I mean, consistency stuff, that's it, and. He's already a great player. Like, I already think he should have a shot at like a world's team because he's so dynamic and he adds an element that no one else is going to have. And, there's a lot of players like him around the world that USA like typically doesn't have. And like, he would be a great fit for something like that.
Who was the MVP for Ring at Nationals?
Oh man. I don't know. Like I couldn't tell you the MVP of the Flyers was either. There's just so many people that played lights out yet again. It's like we were thinking about it after the UDL finals, and we're like, who's the MVP? We're like, we have no idea. It could be like 5 guys, and it's the same kind of thing here. I mean, I always go back to Saul and Matt because they're the drivers of our offense, and it's like I don't know how to pick one of those guys. I mean, Jack is obviously like the heart of the offense. So you can pick him. Oscar played freaking amazing. Pick him. But like, I think once again, it's like possession stuff. That's kind of what starts our offense. It's like you pick Saul or Matt. And I think people like vastly underrate Matt too. It's like when they talk about our like center handler, they talk about Saul and they like have no idea how many jams Matt gets us out of. And he's just like so smooth, so consistent. He doesn't throw as deep as much as Saul. And I think people like, dig the long ball, and maybe that's why Saul gets more credit for things. But like Matt gets us out of so many jams that it's small things that people like vastly underrate. So I think any of those guys could be our MVP. Durs, Terrence Henry, Allen. Like Allen played a little bit of tweener this tournament, but like all those guys offer so much in like individual situations that, I think Durs probably had the best tournament of all those guys, but I think in terms of like, if you had to pick an MVP, it'd probably be one of those 4 guys that I mentioned.
So this gets me to a point that I've been thinking about lately, and I'm not the world number 1 X's and O's guy, but when we've seen a paradigm shift, I feel like in Elite Ultimate, away from big giant cutting lane offense to dominator, triangle based reset space, like that has honestly in a lot of cases been developed in some ways in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. We saw Brown have a ton of success with that when they won their college title. We've seen, and so like the revolver style offense is giving way to, even with Pony, you don't think of it as much with Mickle, but like he was one of those guys like being a little dink and dunk. And so defenses, it feels like to me, have yet to figure out how to really deal with this because everybody went to, switching and junk to beat the revolvers of the world. And like that offense has like kind of been killed off. And now you have this new thing that people don't seem to know how to deal with. And then, we see just 2 breaks in the men's final. So my question to you is, does that ring true? And what is going to be the thing that defenses have to figure out to stop this kind of offense, which seems so difficult to deal with?
So I guess I view it as your small ball gets you out of trouble, but you still need big space throws and cuts. And, when I draw up plays or when I think about offense, I think of it like, 2019 is a really good example of this. Like I ran dominators almost the entire time during the semifinals, and then it became unsustainable because you just get tired. So you can still do that to a degree, but I don't think you can ever like just run small ball entirely for an entire game. So I still think of it as like small ball will get you to good spots to like find lanes, but you still need big space throws and you still need big space cutters, and you still need that like revolver style of cutting to some degree. You don't need it like entirely as like your only system. It just needs to be kind of integrated as like, a lot of things we do is like shallow. We try to take shallow cuts or shallow space and cut deep off of, which is kind of a revolver thing. And then if we pump, we can take an under. Like there, there's a lot of stuff there, but like I still view it as like you still need like possessions where you throw 3 passes, because if you try to throw 50 passes, Frank might say differently, but like if you take 50 to 100 passes to score a goal, it's just unsustainable. It's too many small space things. In terms of like defense, there's defenses that can disrupt that, but like that's where the mix comes in, right? Like you can run clam against small ball because then you're just matching up 3 chasers on, and then you're kind of bracketing the back. But what ends up happening is once you find that little space outlet in like a clam, once you get through that second layer, then you find your space that you need for your cutter. So, there's ways to combat it, but I think people are doing it because they see like Brown do it. They saw us do it. They see like these top teams do it. But I think it's more about those are your outs. Like when you have a lot of trouble generating offense, it's like, all right, let's run small ball for a little while, get us out of trouble, find a lane, find space, and then we'll take a big chunk. And that's kind of the mindset we go with. So it's not like small ball offense. It's like small ball emphasized. And then you like still look for your space when you can get it.
I think it was the AUDL tweeted out today or yesterday. If you had 50 jump balls against Ben Yacht, like how many do you think he'd come down with? If you had 50 jump balls between Terrence Mitchell and BVH,
BVH got
how many is Terrence Mitchell
BVH got his
out?
1 out of his 100. I think
that's it. You think he couldn't replicate it? I mean, he's a lot bigger than
he's a big dude. I mean, he's in shape. Like I was like looking. I was like, God, I just feel like a little troll out here next to BVH. He looks like a Greek god, and I'm just like a flubber. But I don't know. Like BVH is a big guy. Terrence wasn't really jumping to jump there, but yeah, it'd be interesting. I think Terrence still wins the majority of them, but I bet you BVH comes down with like 25% just on sheer like bodying him out of the way because he's a big dude. But yeah, I'd still take Terrence in
I like
a
that
lot
you're
of them.
earnestly answering this question.
I thought I could get it with it.
I got to analyze it all. I thought about it.
25% of the time. So, well, we've already had you here over 30 minutes. Does do you relax at this point? We've never seen back-to-back champions in the men's division of club since 2011 when Revolver went back-to-back in 10 and 11. And otherwise, we've seen lots of really, really good teams that look like they could be like dynastic teams fall short in semis. You know, Pony goes down in 19 and Sockeye goes down this year. How do you avoid that? How do you get back up and try to win again, especially with the challenge of the schedule next year?
Yeah, that is going to be a challenge. Like I have no doubt in my mind it's going to be very difficult. But I mean, the nice thing is I think we have a lot of depth, and even if we not to say these other teams don't, but I even if we had an injury, like a major injury in one of our games, like I just feel like we have so many plug and plays at this point. We'll be okay in terms of like short-term injuries. But like, yeah, the mental thing, I guess the difference is we struggled for so long to do this. And it almost feels like a release valve that we did it. I won't like get into it too much, but like I had like this crazy, you know, for years I've been telling people like if I don't ever win a club or pro championship, I feel like really fulfilled because of like the work I've put in and like what we've built and the college stuff. And I feel really good about like life in general. And I know like you can't win everything. And, you know, I think maybe like I got punched a little bit, like my ego got taken down a couple notches after like maybe 2015 when we won. And I was like, all right, this is easy street. Like we just went from, you know, not making nationals to winning nationals in like 4 years. Now let's just do it in club. And it's like an entirely different process. But I think like the thing that happened is like we lost so much that now we had this release valve. And, you know, I was alluding to, it's like, I like my body work I felt good with, but once we won, like that week of the AEL season, I had this like dream, and it was like all the bad stuff that had happened over the last like 7 years in like the semis, and like it was like there was some like AUDL stuff like dropped in there. Like I was on the sidelines trying to coach, and people were like, "Hey, where does the like merchandise go?" And like, you know, it was just this crazy dream. And then it was like on the Thursday after we won, and I woke up and I like turned to my wife. I was like, holy cow, I had the craziest dream. It was like the culmination of all this pressure and all this stuff. And I was like, I woke up and I was like, holy cow, we won. And it was just like a release. And I think a lot of people probably feel like that. I think there was like a lot of people probably put a good face forward and like probably like say they like feel accomplished when like what they've done. And I do feel like that regardless of what would have happened. But like, I think winning, you know, it feels really good. But like with that, you know, with that history is like now we've had all those losses. I feel like now that we've won one, it's like now I think people stay hungry. They're not going to be happy because we won one. I think it'll feel like, you know, it's like all that stuff in the back of their, you know, the past is now in the past. And now it's like, all right, we won. Everyone take a breath and like get back to work. And I just don't think that people are going to be satisfied because of like the history there. We didn't do it too fast. It took a really long time. There's a lot of people that are still like want more, you know, and, you know, like Noah, right? Like Noah's like, I want to win like 2 or 3 now. And like, now, you know, he's going to put in the work for it. He's not just saying that. So I do think like that history is like, it's still going to keep us motivated and hungry, even though we won. So, you know, I think the pressure's off, and now it's like, get back to work and use that as your, you know, as your motivation.
I know you're not coaching this season, but give us your thoughts on UNC, both the women and the men coming up in this college regionals and nationals.
I mean, I would say they were both like pretty high probability of winning, but like Colorado, that Lotus team is pretty stacked. I just don't know. Like, I don't know how this is going to shake out with all these kids coming back. Like there's kids like 6 years that are coming back that I thought were like, even for UNC, that are like, I thought were not playing anymore, and they are. So I don't really know. Like, I know UNC I think they won sectionals and their top 7 guys were playing in the AUDL halftime.
Oh my God.
So
I know that.
and that's like against State and Wilmington and like, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like they're pretty stacked, but I don't know enough about the other like teams that are going to have these 6 years that come out of the woodwork that, if they have like 5 or 6 of these guys, they could have be a great team all of a sudden. Like, and then like the Colorado stuff with the Lotus team. I mean, if those guys are all in college, like you're going to, they obviously like they made club nationals with the college team. That's like unheard of. So pretty crazy, but I don't know. I would say like, I bet I dabble in the gambling world. So maybe like for both of them to win, it's like 2.5 to 1 and like, even for both in like their respective divisions, something like that.
I already called it on this show. Pleiades winning is a lock. It's done. We don't even need to play it out.
It's hard to, I know it's hard to win until you do it.
All in. It's true. It is true.
but yeah,
I mean,
they're
when was the
positioned.
last time that Syzygy won? I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
Yeah.
So
I mean, man, the grounds here are pretty fertile with amazing prospects. I can tell you that much. Like, it's just crazy how many of the young kids, not even, some of the stuff I've been doing with like developmental stuff, like just even like the couple things I've attended, it's like insane how many good players there are. I mean, I don't think we're like unique, but it's just like kind of crazy like that there's this many players that what this game's going to look like in like 5 years around here. I hope all over the country it's going to be pretty incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's a legacy that you will leave behind after all of the years of coaching in the area. I mean, seriously, like you think about the coaching tree that you have. We talk about it sometimes. It's going beyond the triangle at this point. Yeah.
I mean, it's awesome. It feels really good to have all these. It doesn't feel good when Snell and Quan beat you in the semifinals and nationals, but it feels really good to like know that those guys are out there and like spreading the, growing the sport. And just locally, it's like so awesome to watch all these kids that, and like John had a giant part of that. Like he's kind of we like to refer to me as like the grandpa, and he's like the dad of, all these kids that are like now coaches and awesome players. So it's great. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about the future. There's so many good players that, when I retire in like 2 years, I'll be on the sidelines watching everybody like ball out.
Okay. So I have one last question. Quick one. Is the band coming back together? Are you going to keep the Oscar, the Nethercutt, William, guys that don't live in the area on the team?
I don't see why not. I mean, those guys are in the right to go to Worlds, so we don't want to like take that away from them. I would say we have to talk to them still. I mean, I know Ryan. I'm almost sure Ryan and Jack are going to be in, but like John's in Colorado. I assume he's going to want to play as much as he can. So, but yeah, like there's no reason to say we wouldn't.
All right. Well, congrats again, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Always appreciate it.
Mike DeNardis with us here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Great to catch up with Mike DeNardis, and it's now time for our rapid fire regionals preview segment as we get ready for 4 regions this weekend. And off we go here. Atlantic Coast, 2 bids in women, 3 bids in men. Keith, what should we be looking for?
Oh, man. These are 2 regions with a lot of high-quality teams, as has been the case recently. North Carolina expected to dominate on both sides, so you're looking for that. You're looking to see how far ahead of the field are they, because I think it'll portend as to their championship title aspirations. But when you look at the women's division, there's kind of a mix of teams behind them. We have a whole glut of them in the power rankings, whether it's Appalachian State, we talked about earlier, but then Wilmington, Duke, can one of these teams really emerge as the second team in the region? Virginia, My money's probably on Virginia. They have some talent back, but they just have had a good program that's been able to develop people. So I think if I had to put my money on someone, it's Virginia. But App State, get the hype train rolling. That could be what happens. I mean, we talk about in the preseason in the fall how advantageous it is to just have like two people who can just take over a game. That matters a lot. And for a lot of these teams, that's basically the state they're in. I mean, they've had a couple months of practice. Your rookies are not exactly super integrated, so teams are not going to be as deep, and that's going to allow teams with top heavy strategies to be successful, I think.
On the men's side, North Carolina, of course, the favorite. They're pretty likely to wrap up one of those three bids. And then after that, it gets more interesting. You've got NC State, you've got Wilmington, you've got Maryland, Virginia Tech. Maybe William and Mary can make something happen.
There's some Duke hype, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it's Duke for real, but I remember before even the season started, people were like, "Oh, you got to watch out for Duke next year."
I'm looking at the roster. Not a lot of names I know. Seth Weaver.
Maybe that's the big pickup there is Seth Weaver.
What'd they do at conferences? Let's take a quick gander. They went 4-1. They lost by 3 to NC State.
That's pretty respectable.
Very respectable.
So this is a team that I think people have talked about before. I'm sure they're benefiting from the same rising tide in the North Carolina area, but yeah, they might need a little more experience. I guess there could be players in this team that we don't know about, but I've heard some hype. So maybe they're a sleeper, your Georgetown, so to speak, of years past. We've certainly seen crazier things happen at AC Regionals, but given how deep the region is already, it's going to be a tough battle for your Marylands, your Wilmingtons, your Virginia Techs, and so on.
On we go to Great Lakes. No women's teams listed yet in the bracket up on USA Ultimate's website. The men's side, Michigan's going to be your favorite here, but it's a 2-bid region. Okay, so normally this is a 1-bid region. Michigan would be kind of like a candidate to just mop it up, but now you've got this second bid. Is it Indiana's time finally, Keith? Indiana's been knocking on the hype train door for all these years, and they haven't made.
I feel like they've never gotten out of the station.
I feel like they're going to get zapped by Chicago. That's how this goes. But no, I mean they actually have a talented team. Should be fun to see what happens. It really does feel like everybody's going to be kind of scrapping and clawing for that second bid. Illinois, Purdue. I will not admit to say that I know a lot about these teams for the most part. Michigan, like I said, I think they're a top 10 quality team. I expect them to win easily. After that, could be anyone's game. What do we know about the women's side?
Well, there's 2 bids there too. As wild as it is to say it, we do have Chicago, well ahead of the other teams in our power rankings. Although I think Michigan is a team that's like on the power rankings watch list. But Michigan also lost handily to Notre Dame at their conference championships. So Notre Dame could be in the mix to pull it off. Northwestern, I don't think really got off to an impressive start. So I don't know if there's quite that third or fourth team to break in, but I feel like it's going to be 2 of those 3 teams, Chicago, Notre Dame, and Michigan. And I feel like Chicago is certainly a big favorite among the other 2. And the programmatic success, for Michigan, they have a couple players who've had some experience at the club championships. I don't think Notre Dame can boast the same, but we'll see, the conference's results, how much they actually mean when these teams potentially get a rematch with a bid on the line.
Finally, the Metro East has a year where they can get a size bid, and they don't get one.
Ugh.
1 bid for the Metro East in both men's and women's. So, tough times. But that said, it's appropriate for this region to only get 1 bid. It's going to be a dogfight, though. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, Keith, is who's going to come out on top here. Rutgers beat NYU 8-5 in Metro NY in the men's conferences. If you take a look over at the Western NY, Cornell edged out SUNY Binghamton 11-10. So, those are the names that you'd expect to be up at the top. Cornell, Rutgers. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the matchup in the final, but neither of those teams looks like super convincing based on what we saw at conferences. It really does feel like this is a time when any team could come out there and take it. Keith, obviously you coach in the women's division of the Metro East. What should we expect to see there? No UConn, unfortunately.
No, we could just show up. I don't know, all this roster confusion, we'll sneak our way in there. You know what I mean? Hey, we've actually been pretty good.
Who's checking? Just show up, get on the field.
We can just join it. We're on Princeton. We're Princeton. I think that usually you would say Yale, Cornell, those are the favorites. Princeton maybe. But Cornell actually didn't even win their conference. They lost to SUNY Binghamton, which is a bit of a surprise, and it wasn't close. It was 11-2. So, that's pretty scary for Cornell. So that makes me feel like Yale, who won the Eastern Metro East conferences, is probably a sizable favorite. They've actually lost a lot of the players I think that drove their success in recent years. There's a couple of those have appeared on other nationally notable rosters. So it'll be exciting to see the Yale grads apply their trade elsewhere. But they do have Wilhelmina Graf, who is a player who I believe played Youth Ultimate in Utah. She played at Junior Worlds with the Mexican team, the Mexican national team. She could be is likely to be one of, and could potentially be the best player in the region. So I feel like that's a big leg up. So I'd have my eyes on Yale, but it like in the men's division, there's not a lot of information, and things could certainly go in a different direction from there. You could see there's still some talented players on Columbia who changed their name from Pandemic, understandably why, to Curbside. I just found that out. They were the best team in the region previously, and I certainly could see them repeat. They still have some of the talent from that team as well.
All right, we head over to the Northwest in the men's division. Is it 3 in the men's as well? It's just 2 in men's. 2 bids for both the women and the men. The women missed out on a tiebreaker with the Ohio Valley. I mentioned that earlier. So in the men's division, Washington is your 1 seed, Western Washington 2 seed, Utah the 3 seed, Oregon State the 4 seed. There's always some intrigue for that second bid, or second or third, when you're looking at the men's division. I think Washington's pretty clearly the best team here. Western Washington should feel like a pretty clear second team, but, not unbeatable. Daniel Ma, there's some nice players on this roster. Washington, though, is like a national finals contender playing with a bunch of teams that are hoping to make nationals. So it should be pretty exciting to see what happens in that game to go. Who's going to be in that game? We'll see. I'm excited to see what these Utah teams can do. Utah, though, the 3 seed, may be missing some players due to the conference's rostering issue we discussed at the start of the show.
Indeed, but they're the other team that's in our power rankings from this. Although I would say again, like I said about Michigan, the women's division, I think Oregon State in the men's division is kind of like a watch list team. I think that they have enough talent to come up and beat out Utah for that second spot. Obviously, notable absence in Oregon. So no ego. So that's going to open up an opportunity for a team to get a really valuable experience going into the college championships. For me, I think it's between Utah and Oregon State. I like them a little bit more than Western, but Western certainly could prove me wrong. Like you mentioned, Daniel Ma is going to be one of the best players in the region. Quinn Edgerton also on that squad. So there's some good players on each of those teams. But yeah, they're all fighting for that second spot behind Washington.
And then on the women's side, Keith.
Again, Washington, big favorite here too. Here Oregon is in the mix, and they are in our top 25 as well. Rachel Hess is back for that team, so she could help drive the bus for them. But Western Washington, another top 10 team. It's tough to say after that if there's without UBC in the mix, Whitman not going either. So I don't really know if there's another team that feels like they could be a contender at all. So it's really going to come down to, can somebody upset Western Washington? Because it feels like Washington's really in the driver's seat. I guess Western could upset Washington themselves, but has Oregon got the chops to jump in on one of those teams? Maybe. It's a really tough ask. Those are 2 top 10 really talented programs that have semifinals on their mind. So it's a tough ask, but possible, especially in a year like this one.
So there it is. That's your regionals roundup here for weekend number 1. We'll, of course, be back with the results next week and look ahead to weekend number 2. There's 3 weekends of regionals as we head through this gauntlet towards this December college nationals. That is going to do it for this week's show. Make sure to join us for our subscriber bonus segment. We will be talking about our picks for the Club Nationals, the game, the Beat Charlie Challenge, and kind of doing some analysis on what went well,
post-mortem,
what didn't go so well, what we wish we'd done differently, what we think we would stand by even today. So join us for that. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening on your favorite podcast app, give us a review. And hey, tell one friend about the show that you think would like to tune in. We
or an
appreciate
enemy.
it.
Tell somebody.
You know what? If you hate the show and you hate listening to the show, tell your enemy so that they have to hate it too. Give us 1 star. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back with you next week right here on Deep Look.